Where do you start your story after you've written the rough draft? Welcome to the Write Your Family Histories channel's Writer's Corners, where you ask questions that don't quite fit various topics and I answer them. I'm Devin Noel Lee, the author of A Recipe for Writing Family History, a quick guide to help you rapidly write your family stories and turn them into books for your shelves. Today's Writer's Corner focuses on where do you start your story after you've written the rough draft. Does that make that clear? You are not starting with a blank screen and asking where do I start. You have created a rough draft and now you're trying to decide, now where do I start my story for my readers to enjoy? Okay, so here's some feedback from our viewers. Stacy has shared her grandmother's story before, and she likes to start with the day her grandmother died as the prologue. But sometimes there is something very interesting in your life you want to open with. So when you're writing, when you get into the editing phase, you will look through the stories and make these judgments. I like that the day she died to lead off the story. She shared it. I can't remember if it was on the Family History Fanatics deep dives for channel members or if it was on this channel, but I do remember you writing about this. And it was powerful. And we went and said, talk about your census and really get us in there. What did the hospital room smell like? What were you crying when you talked to? Was it, ugly crying, or was it a trickle down the cheek? Like, tell us what was going on. What sounds did you hear? And it was a really powerful hook into her story. And then she went into the life story, and then eventually she needs to circle back. And I think it's a great starting point because Stacy was so close to this grandmother, and you could just feel that when you read Stacy's story. But for others, the death isn't the most interesting. For my grandfather, William James Townsend, my Civil War great-grandfather, I find the most interesting point is when he was in the Civil War, he did get this measles and basically hospital gangrene. And so he was blinded, and so he came home. He doesn't have a mom and dad to return to. I still don't know what happened to them with all my research. And he meets somebody shortly after he comes home, and he's injured. I think because I did this massive research, the whole regiment, I think I figured out how he met his wife, or at least through whom introduced them. And they go on to have a big family. And he's a farmer who's blind. I think that turning point is pretty interesting. And so I would start with that. With my grandfather, my actual, one generation removed grandfather, he died when I was 2, but he loved the Ohio State football team. Loved it. He was an usher at the stadium whenever he was driving around town and couldn't go to the football games. He would have it on the milk truck because he was a milkman delivering milk door to door. He would be playing it. And so for me, when I started doing the social history research, I discovered, guess what was starting to be developed the year he was born? The Ohio State football stadium. And shortly after my grandfather died, the famous coach Woody Hayes, or at least famous for Buckeyes, Woody Hayes, his career is over in a bit of a scandal. My grandfather didn't live to see that happen, so he went to his grave with Woody Hayes being the most successful Ohio State Buckeye football coach to that point in their history. And so for me, I started his story with Ohio State stadium being built, and then I tied him into it, and then I wrapped it up with a little football history at the end. Okay, so Diane has a different story. She was talking about starting with her grandfather's time in a children's home, working back then forward. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is probably the most powerful technique in writing. In genealogy, too often, somebody was born and then they had a childhood and then they had an early adulthood and then they died. And it just keeps following that same flow over and over and over again. But if you find an interesting point, start there. But Diane, let me make this suggestion. Don't fully flesh out his time in a childhood home. Just give us a little bit, then go back, bring us to that point, share the rest of the story, and then go on. And then as a conclusion, just circle back. You could then say, lessons learned. Did he overcome his childhood trauma in the home, or did the childhood home bless him for then on after? So it is this flash forward, flashback, and circle back technique. You try that, and your story isn't boring, because we all want to write non-boring family histories, and it's a fantastic tip right there. The first chapter of your family history story needs to grab the attention of your readers. So let's continue the discussion now that you've seen some of my thoughts, and consider what are some ways, or what part of someone's life do you start their stories? Which stories have you read and you've been inspired by, and where did they start? Let me know in the discussion below, and maybe we can make a follow-up video with your ideas. So get typing.